but we're just delighted to have you here. We're really delighted to have our graduates here. It's been a, for many of them, it's been 2 difficult, tough years. But I think for many of you who've been supporting them over those 2 difficult, tough years, you're probably even more relieved than they are to graduate. But great to have you here. And we thought it would be great fun and of great interest if we can have someone here who's, how to put it, whose middle name is Korbel. And so we are... We are absolutely thrilled to have Madeleine Korbel Albright here to speak here. And I'm going to sit down a couple of minutes, and we're going to have a little conversation about some sort of ongoing issues in the world. And then we'll have some additional elements of the program. So I hope you're in a firm position on your 2 legs, because there wasn't room to put chairs here. But let me just say, I don't think I need to do this, but I'd like to certainly mention that Dr. Albright was the 64th president. How did that happen? 64th Secretary of State of the United States. In 1997, named as the first female Secretary of State, really wrote the book, maybe even the television show on Madam Secretary. I know she's been on it, actually. And became, in 1997, the highest-ranking woman in the history of the U.S. government. Earlier, in 1993, 1997, Dr. Albright served as the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, and as such was a member of President Clinton's cabinet. She is a professor of practice of diplomacy at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. I don't know what that is. It's some kind of institution. I guess somebody east of the Mississippi tries to teach international studies. She's also president of the Truman Scholarship Foundation, member of an advisory board, the U.S. Defense Department's Defense Policy Board. She is the chairman of the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, and NDI is in some 77 countries around the world. And for those of you graduating and looking at overseas careers and in jobs that really make a difference, you can't do better than in NDI. And in the year 2012, Secretary Albright was chosen by President Obama to receive the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, in recognition of her contribution to international peace and democracy. So I'm going to swing around here, and I think we're going to have a little conversation for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a couple of people we want to bring up on the stage, and then we'll all get ready for the graduation this afternoon. Secretary Albright, Madeleine, welcome.
Good. Ambassador Dean, glad to be here, and this really is home to me. And my father obviously had a huge influence on me. All we ever talked about was foreign policy, and so the fact that there's a school named in his honor and that you're the dean and many of you are graduates, it's fantastic. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's always an honor and a pleasure to be with you. We went through some tough times in Kosovo. Sometimes when you're in the middle of those things, you're not sure how you're going to come out of it, but I think it's done very well, and I just want to say it was a real pleasure to have 3 students here from Kosovo that you were able to meet. Yeah. So what do you think the new president's going to look at in the inbox on January 20th?
Well, it'll be kind of empty. All right. I don't think that, we have been involved in national security policy for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen things as complicated and as intertwined as they are now, with the fact that the institutional structures that are supposed to deal with those issues don't work. And so I think we're at a particularly difficult time, and one that is going to require the new president that she's really going to have to,
Wait, if there's a woman president, she will then be the senior-most woman in government?
That is so, yes, absolutely.
You're comfortable with that?
I think that's fine. But I think that the part that is interesting is kind of to look at the category of issues that are out there. And clearly, there are the global ones that have to be dealt with, and something obviously always to do with nuclear proliferation, which brings me to the part of the world that you dealt with a lot, is North Korea, and what are the various aspects that are going on there. And the other person running for president now thinks that Japan and Saudi Arabia should have nuclear weapons. So,
Oh, he wants to give nuclear weapons to South Korea.
that too, you know, and many whatever, or use them.
Yeah.
But I do think that nuclear proliferation is going to be an issue. Climate change is going to be an issue, because that is something that is a big accomplishment and needs to be followed up. Fighting poverty internationally is a big issue, because that is what provides, in many ways, the venue or the environment for the creation of very unhappy people. And then I also think that so those are the global ones, and then there are those that are regional ones, and I think that our relationship with China is the most important one of the 21st century, but the most dangerous area is the Middle East. And it's a crisis of the Middle East that is spewing out into other parts of the world. And then whatever the Russians are doing in Europe. An area that I think will provide good news is Latin America, that there are a lot of fascinating things going on. And then there's going to be an awful lot of activity in Africa. So the inbox will be full, and one of the things that happens, and I'm sure that the students here have paid attention to this, and that you are telling them that that often the urgent crowds out the important. And the question is how the decision-making process led by the president is one that makes you look at the important and develop longer-term plans and figure out what the unintended consequences of the decisions are going to be.
I think what's striking, too, you mentioned China, but what's striking is the fact that the great powers, I mean, the permanent representatives in the Security Council, aren't really finding a way forward together.
No. Well, the problem, having served on the Security Council, and I don't know how many hours in the government have been spent about whether you should enlarge the Security Council. So when we were in office, we had suggested that Germany and Japan become permanent members, given the size of their economies and importance. And the first country to come to me to complain was Italy, saying, "This is outrageous. We lost the war too," which is not a great campaign slogan. At any given time, out of 15 members of the Security Council, there were 5 Europeans. And so I'd go to a European ambassador and I'd say, "Can I have your help on X vote?" And the ambassador would say, "Well, not now, because the EU does not yet have a common position." So then 2 days later, I went to the person again. I'd say, "Now, can you help me?" And the ambassador would say, "No, because the EU does have a common position," which means that the EU should have the permanent seat, but there's no way the Brits and the French are going to give up there. So it's the Rubik's Cube part.
Yeah.
And I do have to say this about my past. I am a UN creation in many ways, because we came to the United States because my father was representing Czechoslovakia on a commission to do with India and Pakistan over Kashmir. He's dead, I'm old, and the problem is worse than ever. And it's kind of an example of but I did win the United Nations contest for the Rocky Mountain Empire when I was here in the 10th grade.
We're glad you did.
Yeah. But at the moment, I think it's one of the things, Chris, when I was saying that the institutions don't work, the UN structure, for whatever reason, is not dealing with the problems and has to be looked at, because that cliche, if it didn't exist, we'd invent it. But at the moment, we do have to do something more with it.
Yeah. But I mean, when you look at those countries that you and I are so familiar with, Poland, Czech Republic, I mean, the whole idea was to somehow get Russia into that sort of club of kind of coming westward. And for many Poles, the expression was a Russia without Ukraine is just Russia. A Russia with Ukraine is the Soviet Union. So are we going back to the future here or back to the USSR?
Well, I think it's interesting what you said. We did want to get them into the club. In reading their propaganda at the moment, they act as if that had been an insult, that we weren't respecting them because we wanted them to be part of the international system, which really goes to show you that Putin lives in a parallel universe.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the issues here is to try to figure out how we deal with a Russia that is going through an identity crisis. In '91, when I was a professor and out of office and doing various surveys, we had a major survey of all of Europe, including Ukraine, Russia, and Lithuania, and we had fancy questionnaires and focus groups. And something I'll never forget is a focus group that was outside of Moscow, and this man stands up and he says, "I'm so embarrassed. We used to be a superpower, and now we're Bangladesh with missiles." I apologize if there's anybody here from Bangladesh.
I think we're okay.
But I think that that was an identity crisis, and Putin has identified himself with the identity crisis, and he's going to bring everything back. And Ukraine for them is, Ukraine has a complicated history. There's no question about it. I mean, Russia was born in Ukraine, and Khrushchev gave it away. But the bottom line is, it should be and has to be an independent country that has a right to make up its own mind.
Right.
And Putin cannot keep creating incidents of a variety of kinds in Ukraine, as well as mucking around in the Baltics and in the Arctic Sea and various things to show that he can recreate a very large empire.
Exactly. You know, going further south, we had a Korbel graduate. He got his master's and a PhD from us named Javad Zarif.
Yep.
And he sat down, about a year ago, he sat down with our Secretary of State, who I think is the first white male Secretary of State.
In a very long time. There are a lot of little boys that are, by the way, my youngest granddaughter, 8 years ago, said what's the big deal about Grandma Maddie being Secretary of State? Only girls are Secretary of State. And so there are a lot of little boys that are now encouraged.
So anyway, so when the Korbel grad, Javad Zarif, sat down and worked this out with the, actually it wasn't just our Secretary of State, and that's an important point for Americans to understand. It was a lot of different players, including Russia, China, Britain, France, and Germany. So will the new president, I mean, there's no going back from this, is there?
No, I mean, it's an agreement, and it's a very useful one, but it can't be just left there. What she has said is we have to distrust but verify. Yeah. And the aspect of the agreement is it has very good verification, international verification procedures backed by the group that you said, and also the United Nations and a variety of sanctions that would snap back. Right. But I think it was a good agreement and very worth doing. By the way, there was a meeting during the General Assembly session last year. Zarif was there. He's very proud of having gone here. Yeah. And he wrote a dissertation, which I would love to get a copy of, which is about preemption or something. I think it would be worth...
We can help you with that.
No, but...
For those PhDs out there, your dissertations live forever.
But it's interesting in terms of his saying how he really... it's interesting to watch them and kind of watch the politics of Iran in terms of how they are operating with the supreme leader and their own politics there.
Yeah, when he says he's Western educated, it takes on another meaning. And, you know, we don't, so much to talk about, but I would like to just drill down a little on China. I mean, the point I always make is we can't outsource North Korea to China. We have to work with China on tougher measures toward North Korea. And yet, with China, we just can't seem to find a rhythm these days.
Well, I do think some of it is, or much of it is their doing, because what has happened is Xi Jinping, I think, is the most dynamic and powerful leader in so many ways, either since Deng Xiaoping or Mao. But he really, all of a sudden, has found that it's more difficult than he thought. And some of the reforms that he's put in place aren't exactly working, and he's using some of the anti-corruption language and legislation, so to speak, to get rid of his enemies. So there's that. He also is doing something that is happening in many places. When you're in trouble economically, you blame the outside and you rouse the sense of nationalism, which he is doing. And what I find very difficult, I go to China quite a lot, and all you have to do is kind of go like that, and the anti-Japanese feelings come out. And so there's that kind of sense that we have not respected them. They are doing, I don't call them islands, the rocks that they're building on the rocks, and spreading out. And so part of the difficulty is that. What is happening next week is that Secretary Kerry and Secretary Liu are going there for these major talks where they aren't just talking about foreign policy, they're talking about the range of discussions, economic. I'm sure they'll talk about North Korea. Part of our problem is that we don't agree what to do with North Korea. They are concerned that the regime there will collapse, and not only will there be chaos, but that American forces that will, in fact, will be able to go. By the way, one of the things that Kim Jong-un just said is that he couldn't deal with American forces. His father, I am still the highest sitting American official to have met with Kim Jong-il. People have met with him since they've left office, but I was in office, and when I talked to him, he said, you can keep your forces in South Korea. Maybe we should get a transcript of that, too.
That would be good, yeah. I don't think his son has said that, though.
No, well, I think they had. Something I read a couple of... No, he has said that he wouldn't allow them to be there.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So he needs to see that his dear, beloved father had a different view. But I do think the problem with the Chinese is that we don't see things that we would like to see a denuclearized peninsula, but we don't agree on some of the other stuff.
Right. So I think it requires a real deep dive.
Very
on
much.
this, and I think we have to really
And it is dangerous.
stay engaged.
You know, there's Putin the worst and Kim Jong-un the nut.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we're kind of featuring global warming here because of our air conditioning is not working. So we're not going to be able to talk too long. But I just, you know, you will be talking to the undergraduates tomorrow, giving a commencement address and receiving an honorary doctorate from the University of Denver. So
I'm honored. Thank you.
we are. In honoring you, you've honored us because we're just delighted to do that. But we have a lot of master's graduates here, and I wonder if you can give them a word of advice. They're coming out of a professional master's program. They're going to be hitting the streets. They're going to be working in places like NDI. They're going to be working in places like maybe the UN, international business, NGOs as well. So there are a lot of things out there. And I don't think for them history has ended. I think in many respects it's just begun.
Well,
so,
first of all, I think it's a fantastic degree to have, and you are entering a growth industry. I think that there are more and more issues that are going to have to be dealt with. I mean, when I went to college, which was sometime between the invention of the iPad and the discovery of fire, things were pretty much set. And there are an awful lot of things that have to be done. And the field is huge in so many different ways. And so with the kind of degree you're getting from here, I think you will be sought after, and you will have a really important role to play to fix some of the mess that some of us created for you. But I do think the thing that I always do say, and I say this to my own students, it is very hard after you have been praised and loved and gotten good grades to go into a job and think that everybody will love you right away and that you will make policy and everybody will say, thank God they're here because we have been. I think we all started at some lower level and have to kind of work your way up. And so be proud of what you've achieved and be ready to make coffee and be busy and know that you have entered an incredible world that needs your help and needs your thinking in terms of rethinking how the system works. So.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think now we're going to ask a couple of special people to come up to the
Great.
stage. And so I'm going to just we can stand here. And I'd like to invite Colonel Dan Allen to come forward. Dan is this year's Army Fellow. And this is a program we've been very, very pleased to have. Every year we have an active duty service member, often a service member who's served in some places that you would not want to take a vacation in. But it's been for us a really fabulous program where the Army Fellow talks to students informally, may sit in on classes, and is otherwise all about our campus. And I think is just very, very available to all our students. So we're going to continue this program. One of our alumni is George Casey, who's promised us that he will continue to back it. We have 2 Army Fellows coming next year. But this year, it's all been Colonel Tom Allen. So I want Colonel Dan Adams. So I want Colonel Allen to come forward here.
Colonel, what a great idea that you're here. Terrific. Wonderful.
And we're presenting to him a picture of this fabulous Korbel School.
Beautiful.
And you'll hang it on your wall or on your pup tent wall, wherever you're, and anyone who comes up to you and says, "What's that?" you'll say, "You have to go there."
Yeah,
Yes,
great.
So,
Wonderful.
so, like that.
Okay.
We can't rehearse everything, so.
Straight. Okay.
All right.
All right. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I'm going to ask Erica Chenoweth. Where is Erica? Oh, there's Erica. And Erica, you're going to introduce our PhD candidates who will then come up and we'll have a little photo.
Great. Thank you. So obtaining a PhD requires a great deal of creativity, self-discipline, dedication, sacrifice, and patience. For those who don't know, it involves a years-long process of intensive coursework, written and oral comprehensive exams in 2 fields of political science, extensive professional training, and most importantly, writing and defending a doctoral dissertation, which is essentially the equivalent of writing a book on some novel research question. At the Korbel School this year, we're proud to say that we're conferring doctorates on 3 exceptional students. Let me introduce them to you very briefly. So first we have Sabina Pavlovska-Hilaiel. Sabina has a BA and an MA from the University of Sofia in Bulgaria, and then she came to the Korbel School to get her MA. Deciding she loved us very much, she stayed to pursue her dissertation, which is called The EU's Influence on Managing Levels of Corruption in the Post-Communist World. This thesis was supervised by Professor Rachel Epstein, and next year, Sabina will be a lecturer at Colorado State University. We also have Malliga Oak. Malliga comes to us from Ludwig Maximilians Universität in Munich, Germany. And she also got an MA at the University of Colorado at Denver. Her thesis is called The Adoption of Feminist Policies by Conservative Governments, and it was supervised by Professor Martin Rhodes. Malliga will be an assistant professor of global studies at Idaho State University starting this fall. And then third, we have Ahmad Dost. He's not with us today, but Najim has a BA from Trent University in Canada and an MPA in International Development from Harvard University. His dissertation is called Aid Effectiveness in Afghanistan, the Role of Local Human Capacity in Explaining the Health Sector's Success. The thesis was supervised by Professor Haider Khan, and Najim will be starting his job this week as National Performance Measurement Manager at the Canadian Ministry of Defense. Before we congratulate these colleagues, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that it does take a village to create a doctorate. And I'd like to have us all give a hand to the family members, friends, and partners whose patience and support have helped to nurture these scholars throughout their academic careers. I'd also like to acknowledge the student affairs staff at the Korbel School, particularly Associate Dean for Academic Affairs Frank Laird and Dina Ahmad for their assistance in making sure that the administrative matters have been as seamless as possible. Now to Drs. Pavlovska-Hilaiel and Dr. Oak. Please join us on the stage. Welcome to postdoctoral life. You've accomplished something that very few people in the world actually accomplish. And as you take some time to mark this significant milestone, I hope you know that your Korbel family is very proud of you. We'll be cheering you on as you move forward in your lives and careers, and we look forward to witnessing your continued success. So everyone, please join me in congratulating our new doctorates.
I think one of
Did your picture?
Maybe,
Okay.
yes.
What's that?
Oh, sorry.
Very good. Great. Really, congratulations. Hard work, I know.
And your speech about women going to...
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And now finally, I would like to ask Associate Dean Frank Laird to come up on the stage and carrying a beverage of some kind and leading us in a toast for our graduates.
I'll probably use the podium.
All right. So he'll use the podium. So.
Okay, great.
My toast ends our formal program, so at the end of it, make yourselves at home, enjoy the buffet, and also to remind people that down on the first floor forum, we have an identical buffet to what you see up here. So if you're feeling a little crowded up here, there's lots more food down on the ground floor forum. Every fall, I see new students arrive, and I marvel that all these different people have traveled this huge variety of paths that have led to DU and to the Korbel School. Here for the next 2 years, or 4 years, or however many years in the case of our PhDs, you encountered new ideas. You went through educational experiences, novel and familiar. You learned to navigate a complicated new institution. You made new friends. You learned to appreciate the loved ones who supported you throughout all of this. And finally, you make your way here to graduation. From here, you will scatter again, off onto many different new roads. But however far and wide you go, you will take part of us with you. You'll become part of the Korbel School in the wider world. You'll become part of that remarkable collection of practical idealists that we call alums. So I would like to propose a toast to the graduates of 2016, to the paths that brought you here, to all that you've accomplished here, and to the roads you will journey down in the future. To the graduates.
To the graduates. Very good.
I think that concludes our program. Secretary
Great.
Albright, thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you all.
coming home.
Great. Okay, thank you.